How many times have you told yourself, I lost control again? How many times have you apologized for something that came out before you even decided to say it, before you even knew it was coming? You were fine, and then you weren't, and the scary part wasn't the anger itself. It was the speed. Modern humans are deeply ashamed of this. Therapists have built entire careers around it. There are books, apps, breathing exercises, journaling prompts, all of them saying the same thing in different fonts. Control your anger. But nobody asked the real question, not how to control it, not when it shows up, but why it arrives before you do, why your body is already 3 steps ahead of your mind, why the explosion happens and the thought follows. The answer isn't in your therapist's office, it isn't in your childhood, it isn't even in this century, it's 300,000 years ago, around a fire, in a world where the wrong reaction time didn't cost you an awkward conversation. It cost you everything. Here is what we have been told about anger, that it is primitive, that it is something to be managed, suppressed, evolved past, that the truly enlightened person feels the anger rising and chooses, consciously, deliberately, not to act on it, that if you still lose your temper, you haven't done the work yet. This is one of the most biologically backwards ideas modern culture has ever produced, because anger wasn't designed to be slow, it was designed to be faster than thought, faster than doubt, faster than the moment when hesitation becomes fatal. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine you are not sitting where you are right now. Imagine you are standing in an open landscape, no walls, no doors, no lock between you and whatever is out there. The grass is tall, the light is fading, and someone in your group, someone you have eaten with, slept near, depended on for years, takes more than their share of food. Not slightly more, enough that someone else in the group might go without tonight, enough that a child in the group might go to sleep hungry. Now in that moment, what does hesitation cost you? If you pause, if you think it through, if you consider the social consequences, weigh relationship, decide on a measured response, the message you send to every other person watching is this: I can be taken from. And in a world where resources were the difference between your children surviving winter or not, that message was not just embarrassing, it was an invitation. Because it wasn't just about the food, it was never just about the food. Every interaction in a small hunter-gatherer group was a negotiation of status, of trust, of reliability, who could be counted on, who would hold the line, who was the kind of person that, when things got desperate, and they always got desperate, would not fold. The person who paused and calculated was readable, predictable, manageable. The person whose anger arrived like weather, sudden, total, impossible to ignore, that person was something else entirely. That person made the calculus harder, made the cost of crossing them genuinely uncertain. The humans who survived weren't the calmest ones, they weren't the most patient ones, they were the ones whose bodies responded before the conscious mind had time to negotiate. Fast anger wasn't a flaw in the system, it was the system. And you are here, sitting exactly where you are right now, because somewhere in your ancestry, someone's rage arrived fast enough, and accurate enough, and visible enough, to make the person across from them recalculate. You are the descendant of the ones who didn't wait. There is a concept in behavioral biology called the honest signal. It refers to a communication that cannot easily be faked, because the cost of producing it is genuinely high. A peacock's tail is an honest signal. It's expensive to grow, expensive to carry. Something that large and that visible makes you easier to catch, which means only a genuinely healthy animal can afford it. Anger, real, fast, physical anger, is an honest signal. You cannot fake the speed of it. You cannot manufacture the physiological response on command. The flushed face, the elevated heart rate, voice that changes before you decide to change it. These are not performances, they are biological events, and every person watching them knows, on some level below language, that what they are seeing is real. That realness is the point. That is what the signal is for. A group that never showed anger was a group that could be tested indefinitely. A group where anger was visible, fast, and resolved. That group had a different kind of social texture, clearer edges, better defined territory, and paradoxically less actual violence, because the signal did the work before the violence became necessary. In 1994, in a cave system in southern France, researchers found something that didn't fit the story we tell about our ancestors. The cave was called Chauvet, and inside it, preserved for 36,000 years, were paintings, not crude scratches, not accidental marks. Paintings, detailed, deliberate, emotional, lions with muscles suggested by a single curved line, horses mid-motion, a rhinoceros whose horn caught the light the painter clearly understood. But what stopped researchers wasn't the beauty of the images, it was the marks next to them. On several walls, alongside the paintings, were handprints, red ochre pressed against the stone, and some of those handprints were missing a finger, the same finger, across multiple prints, across what appeared to be multiple individuals. Now we don't know for certain what this meant, we may never know, but what researchers noticed was this: the missing finger appeared on adult hands, and the placement of the prints, high on the wall, deliberate, repeated, suggested something intentional, something chosen. Some researchers believe these were marks of grief, that members of this group had lost something, someone, and had physically altered themselves in response, not because they were told to, not because a cultural script required it, but because the feeling inside them was so large that their body needed to do something with it. I want you to sit with that for a moment. 36,000 years ago, a human being stood in a cave, pressed their hand against cold stone, and left a mark that said, "I was here. I felt something too large to carry quietly, and I needed the world to know." That is not the behavior of an animal. That is not instinct in the mechanical sense. That is a creature who understood, on some wordless level, that thing unexpressed becomes something else, that it has to go somewhere, that the body will find a container for it, whether the mind chooses one or not. We talk about anger as if it exists in isolation, as if it appears from nowhere and returns to nowhere. But the researchers who study emotional archaeology, people who physical record of what ancient humans left behind, tell a more complicated story. Anger and grief are not opposites, they are neighbors, they share a wall. The same physiological system that produces rage also produces grief, the same hormones, the same elevated state, the same urgent need for the body to do something with the energy it has generated. In many hunter-gatherer languages, researchers have noted, the words for anger and the words for grief are grammatically close, sometimes nearly interchangeable, not because these people were imprecise, but because their nervous systems understood something that ours has learned to hide. Big feeling is big feeling. The label matters less than the release. In hunter-gatherer communities studied in the 20th century, the Hadza of Tanzania, the Kung San of the Kalahari, the Yanomami of the Amazon, researchers noticed something consistent about how anger moved through the group. It was fast, it was visible, and it was almost always followed by something unexpected: resolution. Not suppression, not the kind of managed silence that modern culture calls healthy conflict resolution, but genuine, rapid, almost physical resolution, voices raised, bodies involved, and then within minutes or hours, not days, a return to the baseline. The anger arrived fully, it was witnessed fully, and then it left. What these communities had, and what we have lost almost entirely, was a container for the anger, not a lid, a container. The group was the container. When you felt it in front of people who'd known you your entire life, people who understood that what was happening wasn't the end of the relationship, it was part of the relationship. It was proof that you were still invested enough to react. There is a researcher named Robert Sapolsky, a neuroendocrinologist at Stanford, who has spent decades studying stress hormones in primates and humans. One of his findings, which sounds almost too simple when you say it out loud, is this: the most damaging form of stress is not the stress of the event itself. It is the stress of the event with nowhere to put it. In study after study, primates who experienced a stressor and had no outlet, no physical response, no social acknowledgement, no behavioral release, showed significantly higher sustained cortisol levels than those who experienced the same stressor and had some form of expression available. Read that again slowly. The same event, the same threat, the same trigger, but the one who had to hold it quietly, they stayed elevated longer. They carried the chemical signature of the event in their body long after the event was over, while the one who got to respond, even imperfectly, even loudly, metabolized it faster. Your body was not designed to store anger. It was designed to move it through. Now think about what happens when you get angry today. You're in a meeting and someone dismisses your idea without really hearing it. Something ignites. But you can't say anything, not here, not professionally. So you hold it. You compress it down into a small, dense thing, and you carry it through the rest of the meeting, through the commute home, through dinner, through trying to fall asleep. And somewhere around 2 a.m., the compressed thing surfaces as something else. Not anger anymore, something flatter, something that doesn't have edges you can grab. Your ancestors didn't do this, not because they were more evolved in terms of emotional intelligence, but because they literally could. The group was right there. The container was right there. The anger had somewhere to go, and it went, and then it was done. What we experience as rage spirals, as disproportionate explosions over small things, as the feeling that you are one minor inconvenience away from saying something you can never take back, that is not untreated anger. That is stored anger. Months of it, years of it, pressed flat and carried quietly, the way your ancestors carried dried meat for winter, except this never gets eaten. It just accumulates. Think about the last time you completely lost your temper over something small, a dropped object, a slow internet connection, a single comment that landed wrong, and think about whether that reaction was actually about that thing, or whether that thing was simply the last item added to a pile that had been building for a long time. The pile is not a personality flaw. The pile is what happens when you live in a world that gives you the triggers but removes the container. Every day, dozens of small violations, small dismissals, small moments where someone takes slightly more than their share and you have to decide, split second, that this is not the time, this is not the place, this is not worth it. And you're right. Each individual time you're right. This is not the time, this is not the place. But the pile doesn't care about your reasoning. The pile just grows. And then someone cuts you off in traffic, and you wonder why you reacted the way you did. Here is what I want you to take from this. The speed of your anger is not a character defect. The fact that it arrives before your reasoning does, that is not something that needs to be fixed. That is 300,000 years of survival engineering doing exactly what it was built to do. The problem is not the anger. The problem is the container. Your nervous system was built for a world where anger could be expressed immediately, witnessed by people who knew you, and resolved within the same day. It was built for a world where the people who saw you lose your temper were the same people who would share food with you an hour later. Where the anger was data, information about the relationship, about the boundary, about what mattered, not a verdict on your character. It was not built for performance reviews. It was not built for family dinners where certain topics are permanently off the table. It was not built for a world where showing the full size of your feelings in public is coded as instability. And I'm not saying to go express your anger at everyone who frustrates you. That's not the lesson here. The social structures we have built are real, and navigating them requires something your ancestors didn't need, the ability to carry feeling across time. But I am saying this. The shame you feel after you lose your temper, the part of you that decides this means something terrible about who you are, that part is wrong. You are not broken. You are ancient. And there is a difference, a real, biological, important difference, between anger that has somewhere to go and anger that doesn't, between the anger that moves through you and the anger that lives in you. Your ancestors knew this difference in their bodies even if they had no words for it. The Kung knew it. The Hadza knew it. The person who pressed their hand against the wall at Chauvet knew it. They didn't manage their anger. They moved it. Those handprints in the cave, those people who stood in the dark and pressed their mark against cold stone, they weren't processing their emotions correctly. They weren't meditating. They weren't journaling. They were doing the only thing that made sense when the feeling was too large to carry quietly. They let the world see it. You come from people who felt things loudly, who didn't have the language for it, or the theory, or the therapeutic framework, who just felt it, all the way, and kept going. The anger that frightens you is the same energy that kept your bloodline intact across ice ages and droughts, and every category of loss the ancient world could produce. It doesn't need to be eliminated. It needs a container. Next time it comes, and it will come, try this. Not as a technique, just as information. Notice that it arrived before you did. Notice that your body knew first. And instead of immediately deciding that this speed means something is wrong with you, just consider the other possibility, that you are exactly as designed, that the speed is the point. That somewhere 300,000 years ago, someone exploded with exactly this kind of feeling. in front of people who understood, and because of it, made it through another night. You're still here. See you in the next one.